isn't the only thing on Australians' minds. In fact, so many people are frustrated that the government seems obsessed with it when there are practical concerns like the cost of living, the cost of fuel, food, electricity and housing that are affecting everyone. Joining me now is unconventional economist Leith Van Onselen to get into the issues that the government doesn't want you to be thinking about. Leith, thank you so much for joining me. New data shows national residential property prices surged through September, and they've now hit an all-time record, with national prices up 0.35%. Now, this is a market, but there are government policies at play here too. What does this say about the effectiveness of government policy in keeping housing affordable for all?
Well, thanks for having me on, Amanda. Look, sadly, the housing crisis is a direct result of the Albanese government's record immigration policy. Now, the June quarter national accounts showed that Australia's population grew by 626,000 last financial year, off net overseas migration of nearly 500,000 people. Now, these are numbers we've never seen before, and they're effectively what's driven this rebound in house prices despite the 4.4% increase in interest rates from the Reserve Bank of Australia. But more importantly, these massive population numbers are driving the rental crisis. So they've created, a record low in rental vacancy rates and obviously driving double-digit rental price gains across the capital cities. Now, sadly, the Albanese government continues to make the housing crisis worse every day by running the most extreme, largest immigration program in this nation's history.
So migration is an obvious lever that's available to government, and they could pull at any time. But an ever-growing population seems to be core to the economic strategy that's been employed by successive governments. It never seems to be about driving an increase, for instance, in the birth rate. Is there a better way to balance these two pressures in a way that keeps the housing affordability imperative front of mind?
Well, the solution is actually pretty simple, Amanda. I mean, common sense would dictate that you merely run the migration system, at the same rate of the ability to build housing, build infrastructure, supply water, all those sorts of things, and also, at a level that's commensurate with the environment's carrying capacity. Unfortunately, we're running numbers that are way, way beyond that, and we have pretty much for 20 years. So I think the solution is really just to dial the numbers back to a level that where basically demand can keep pace with supply, not just across housing, but infrastructure and all these other things.
Policies that attempt to increase the birth rate are unpopular, but ultimately, wouldn't they generate a more sustainable and organic way of increasing population rather than bringing into the country adults who need housing immediately and who need that provided in the short term?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly migration adds to the housing problem immediately because people come over here usually as adults and they go straight in the housing market. Whereas if obviously, children are born, it takes them 20 years pretty much to hit the housing market. So certainly in terms of housing, natural increase through births is a much better approach. That is also obviously very expensive. And I'm also a big believer in choice. I believe people should have as many children as they want. And I'm not really a big fan of this sort of big government telling people, you've got to have more kids, whatever. It's really a personal choice in my view.
Yeah, fair. Instability in the cost of construction, with prices rising several times in the course of the timeline for the build of something really as simple as a family home, are providing a disincentive to normal people to engage in the contract for a new home build, affecting the building start numbers. To what extent do you see industrial relations policies, which have really been quite prominent in the mind of Labor governments, particularly federal but also state, playing a part in the lack of confidence in consumers for new residential builds?
Look, I'll be the first to admit that industrial relations is probably beyond my wheelhouse of expertise. But what I will say is the notion that we can magically ramp up housing supply when we've got obviously high interest rates, we've got shortages of materials, shortages of labour, we've seen a whole swathe of builders go bankrupt, is quite frankly delusional. Again, the solution to Australia's housing supply problem is really to lower population growth, to keep demand through population increase commensurate with supply. Unfortunately, you don't fix supply a supply problem by ramping up demand, as the Albanese government has done through its unprecedented immigration program.
Leith, before I let you go, New South Wales Liberal leader Mark Speakman has copped a bit of a pasting over his comments around the importance of population growth. He said it's in the country's best interests, quote, economically and strategically, to have sustained but sustainable population growth. Take a look at this.
Well, those sort of colourful comments I made, I'm not suggesting we're going to be invaded in the next year or 5 years or necessarily at all. I'm just making the point that in the long run, you have a stronger economy and a stronger country if you have a steady increase in population that grows your tax base, which allows you to spend money on defence.
Yeah, it's certainly
Leith,
an
this has
interesting
been
comment.
reported as a really... Oh, sorry, I'll let you go.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it's a very interesting comment. I think, I think Mark Speakman's actually rolling back his comments to the Daily Telegraph last week, where he's a lot more forceful about Big Australia. Look, all I'll say to Mark Speakman is that this isn't 1940s Arthur Caldwell Australia. There is no populate or perish. The population in 1950 in Australia was 8 million. It's 26.4 million now. So the whole notion that we have to grow the population for our own security is quite frankly ridiculous. Wars are not won through manpower. They're won by technology and alliances and that sort of thing. In terms of, I do agree with him that, we need population growth to be sustainable, but unfortunately, the projections aren't sustainable. The 2023 Intergenerational Report predicted that Australia's population would grow by 14 million people in just 40 years. Now, that's over 50%. And what that is, that's effectively a Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide in just 40 years, which is absurd numbers. And this is, Speakman, I don't think, if Speakman's is endorsing that, he's just quite frankly crazy. Most voters, as we know through various opinion polls, do not support such strong population growth. They want it dialed back significantly. And, my personal view is it's about time that politicians like Mark Speakman represent voters rather than their big business mates, because we are not being represented by political leaders, both sides of politics.
Hey, fighting words. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Leith Van Onselen.